My collection of R cameras has gotten a little out of hand. Today we're going to go over every single R camera that I own, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I use them and what lens I like to pair them with. Let's jump right into it. The first camera that we're going to be talking about today is the Canon R50. This is a APS-C sensor camera. It retails for $579. And I bought this camera, one, because it was pretty affordable, and second, I wanted to upgrade my webcam at my desk back there. And I didn't want to spend a lot anymore. I didn't want to spend any more than that. The options that I had or that I was looking at was getting an additional R8 because of the full frame sensor, but I thought that might have been overkill. And this R50 isn't exactly the quality that I wanted for the webcam, but ultimately it does do its job. But over time, I will get another R8 or a full frame camera and use that as my main webcam, just because the image that comes from a full frame sensor and using it as a webcam is pretty mind-blowing. It's actually exceptional quality. With the R50, I have it paired with the Sigma 18 to 55. I'm sorry, the Sigma 18 to 50 lens. This is a crop sensor. This is a crop sensor lens specifically designed for the crop sensor cameras. If I'm not mistaken, this was actually Sigma's first lens that they made for the RF system. And again, this goes on to my R50 and is used as a webcam that sits static on my computer. I haven't taken a single picture with this camera, actually. I've just been using it as a webcam. Using it as a webcam is actually really easy and convenient because I have a dummy battery at the bottom of it that I run to a USB-C charger that fully powers the camera. And then I have a USB-C cable that runs from the camera, a data transfer cable that runs from the camera all the way to the back of the computer. And you can also use it as an via the HDMI, but in order to use it as the webcam, the easiest workflow that I found is using the data transfer cable, the USB-C to USB-C. I've only used it with the with data transfer cables. Be wary though, I have used it with some USB-C to USB-C cables and it didn't work at all. The image wouldn't show, but it would be charging the battery, which was interesting. I did try some other cables and it did work as a webcam, and it's fantastic because it recognizes immediately. And when you go into your Zoom software or wherever it is that you're going to be using, you can use this camera instead, which really levels up the look of your webcam. A kind of expensive webcam, $580, but I think it's totally worth it, especially if you're one that uses a webcam a lot. And I don't know, I'm in the camera space, so I wanted my webcam to look a little bit more polished and a little bit more refined than just like a 1080p camera or a webcam with a small sensor size. Moving along, the next camera, and by the way, these I'm going through these cameras in no particular order. I just have them laid out in the way that I have it here in my notes. Also, make sure to check out all of the current prices for the cameras down in the description below. Next up, we have the Canon R7. This is another crop sensor camera, and it happens to be the highest end crop sensor that Canon has available for sale. This camera comes in at $1,300. $1,300 for the body only. All the prices that I'm going to be giving are for the body only, and if you guys aren't new to this channel, you may know that I take serious issue with all of the kit lenses that Canon has available. I think that they're much better lenses in the STM primes that should be paired with cameras instead of the subpar kit lenses. This camera has 32.5 megapixels, but taking it out for photographs, I've done it several times, and I've paired this camera often with the 70 to 200, but for like doing for birds and wildlife and just going out in nature, and it's really worked nicely. When I got this camera, actually, it really excited me all over again, or got me excited about photography, because all of my lenses became almost brand new lenses to me instantly because of the 1.6 crop factor. So when you put on the 70 to 200, you get something like a what would that be, like a 105 or a 100 to 250 or 300, which is just a phenomenal amount of reach. So this R7, and that was true obviously with every other lens, but the way that I use it right now is that I use this camera as my overhead camera with a 16 millimeter lens. This tiny little guy is a wide angle lens, and the height that I usually set this at, I make it so that it fits exactly the square, and this paired with this comes out to be, I think, a 16 with a crop factor is close to a 24. Yeah, 24. 16 times 1.6, 25.6, so like a 26 millimeter. And that's wide enough and not a lot of distortion that the surface often looks pretty flat. So that's how I use this camera right now. But this camera is like I said, a 32.5 megapixel camera, and it's super fast. So if you're looking for like sports and like wildlife and fast moving subjects, this is a great camera, but I just don't use it. I don't photograph those kind of subjects very often. I don't photograph those types of subjects very often. So this camera is definitely my most underutilized camera, but I'm glad that I have, because if I ever get an opportunity to go to like a national park, this is the camera that I'm going to be taking with my R7, along with a couple of other cameras if I can only take one, because this will be some really awesome reach. So this would be the camera that I would take. Also, you may notice that all of my cameras have a small rig cage on it, and that is for you know, just for adding utility to every single camera body and mounting positions. I really don't like mounting things to the hot shoe mount or to the bottom of the thread hole. I like to put every one of my cameras in cages, and adding thread holes to the side. They protect the cameras too, and I think they look cool. They do look cool. That isn't the main reason why I got them. I got them plainly for utility, but seeing them as a collection is kind of neat. It's actually why I wanted to do this, is so that I could really take a moment to like reflect on all of the gear that I've accumulated and that I've worked on for the past 5 years. I didn't buy all of these cameras you know, all at one time. It took me 2-3 years in some cases to save up the money to get all of them, and I'm pretty proud of this collection, and I hope to add to it as well. You know, I'm missing a couple cameras here, like the R10, the R100, and then those top tier cameras like the R3 and the R1, which are on my list, but they're in a very, very distant future. Moving along, the next camera that we have here is definitely my baby, the camera that I have loved the most for the longest. It was the most expensive camera at the time that I had bought it. This was several years ago. It's the Canon R5. When I bought it, this camera was about $4,000. Right now, you can buy a R5 body only for $2,900. Still very expensive, but this camera is absolutely spectacular. It has 45 megapixels, which really sets this camera apart from anything else. It's also a full frame sensor, so if you're doing photography, wildlife, or just city, any kind of photography really, you have such you have a lot of room in the edit that you can crop and almost get multiple photos from one singular shot. So this camera right here, when I'm ever doing professional work or work that is incredibly important, I always take this one because the R5 is spectacular. A wedding, you know, one way that I use it a lot is for, I did a wedding a couple of years ago, and I was a one-man show, and I took this camera with me, and I had the 70-200 and the 28-70, and on this one I carried the 28-70 primarily, but that lens at f2 is absolutely stunning, and then paired it with a 45 megapixel camera at 70 millimeters. In the edit, it really looked like I could crop in like 200% and have absolutely stunning photos. And why I mention that is because the photo itself would be this big, but I'd be able to crop and get multiple detail shots inside of the exact same photo, which was spectacular because I'd get the entire scene right at 28-70, punch in at 70 for some compression, and then I'd be able to crop in the edit, you know, copy that image over a copy of that image, and then crop in heavily on like them holding hands. And you can see her ring and his ring, and just detail shots like that, you know, intimate moments of punching in on people's faces at the wedding to get their expression in specific moments. So this camera right here, if you're a professional photographer and want to do events, weddings, the R5 or the R5 Mark II, depending on when you're watching this, is the camera to buy because it's very, very good. Definitely the go-to camera. That lens, however, I do use it primarily, it gets most of its use now as my A camera for YouTube videos or talking head videos, anything really, and then product photography. And this camera lives with a 24 millimeter. 24 millimeters at super wide. Again, that 45 megapixel really allows me to punch in, and I have a lot of moving room in the edit. So if I want to put like text on screen, or I want to just isolate myself or turn it into vertical content, this 24 paired with the 45 megapixels on the R5, really, really good. And I have a mist filter on some of these lenses, which is a nice surprise sometimes because I forget. And then in the edit, I see a little bit of blooming effect. I'm like, nice, that's kind of cool. All right, moving on to the R6. The R6 is, you know, I have no desire to ever sell any of my cameras unless I really, really have to. And this camera was the first camera that I had purchased after I had spent a year with the Canon M50. The Canon M50 was actually my first interchangeable lens camera, and I still own it. I keep it as a desk toy now. It can be used as a webcam too, by the way. So that's a pro tip there. The M50 also still makes a pretty darn good webcam. Easy to hook up too. But that camera, the M50, got me enough gigs, and I was able to bring in enough money that I was able to save up after a year to get the R6. And then the R6 is really what opened up the floodgates for me into what a full frame sensor could really do, the speed of the camera, the file sizes of all of the images, and just holding it felt really beefy, really sturdy, just like nothing I had put in my hand before. And this was the first time with this camera, the R6, that I had noticed that these aren't just for hobbies. These, you know, they are great for hobbyists, of course, but these are tools. These are instruments to do professional work. And when you hold one of these cameras, and it's not just Canons, but if you hold like a prosumer grade like Sony or a Fujifilm, one of those big guys, and you hold them in your hands, you really feel the robustness, the sturdiness of these cameras, and you get a sense of how rugged they are and how they're meant for not necessarily abuse, but they're meant to just keep running and keep going. They really are tools. So that's what this camera is here. And this camera often is paired with the, the R6. When I bought this camera, I think it was $2,500. And right now the R6 Mark I, you could probably find a pretty good deal for about $1,500 to $1,800. But at this point, the R6 Mark II is out, depending on when you're watching this. And that retails brand new for $2,000. So unless you can get this camera for about $1,000 or $1,200, I would just buy the EOS R6 Mark II for $2,000 body only. So if you find this camera for $1,500, don't buy it. Save up a little bit more, get the R6 Mark II. But if you find this camera, the R6 Mark I, for $1,000 or $1,100, then that's a pretty solid deal, and you should definitely pick it up because this camera still is fantastic. Why the Mark IIs are a lot better, by the way, is that the R5 and the R6 Mark Is have a record limit of 30 minutes. And now that I'm into video a lot more than I used to be, that can be a real pain in the ass because sometimes I film running or one of my cameras off to the side, my B or C cam. They need to be running continuously even if my A cam isn't running. So there is some reasons there that the R6, but if you're just strictly photography, then yeah, and you have $1,000 and this camera's on sale for $1,000, the original R6 Mark I, that's a heck of a deal for sure. That lens gets paired with the 70-200. That's this lens right here. This lens is an absolute beauty. The 70-200. They do have a newer version of this lens. It's a Z version, a hybrid video and photo lens. But yeah, this lens is great. A fantastic reach. I love this lens to capture details at events. So if I put it on the 45 or on the R6, the R6, by the way, is still great to crop, but you're not going to get anywhere near as many images out of one image than the R5. So the R6 paired with this one just gets me a nice amount of reach while only dealing with a 20 megapixel sensor that is still really, really beautiful. So that's why I pair that with this, because on the 28 to 70 on the R5 over here, I still get I can get like a 70-200 out of that image by cropping in. On the R6, if I put the 28 to 70 over there, I'm limited. And then this one on this is just definitely OP for sure. A 45 megapixel with the 70-200. That combo right there, R5 with the 70-200, that would be perfect for wildlife photography or trying to get pictures in like Alaska or something epic like that. An R5 with the 70-200, that would be great. But because I don't do those kind of photos, or I haven't had an opportunity to go and take those kinds of shots, I pair the R6 with the 70-200. Yeah, I should mention that all of these lenses really go great with every camera. This is just a list of how I happen to use these combinations the most into my workflows and for all of the creative things that I do. And last but not least, I have my most used all-time camera. My most used camera all-time is the Canon R8. Right now you can find this camera for about $1,200 body only, and it is absolutely worth that price. Used, I can imagine you get about $800, and that's a steal. This camera has a 24.2 megapixel camera, full frame, and it is the camera that I use the most because I use it for product photography and I use it for creating short form content on social media. Why I chose this camera is because it doesn't have a record limit. The video files that come out of this are super manageable and the video is exceptional. A full frame at 24 megapixels, this is a absolutely great video camera. The limitations of it though are the single SD slot, so there is no redundancy. So for professional work, I'd caution you to to probably not use this as your A cam and use it just as a B cam or BTS cam. And the other limitation is that it has a super small battery. But to circumvent those problems, or to not have to deal with those problems, I rig this camera out in a vertical way so that it's made for vertical content. I pair this R8 with the 15 to 35 millimeter lens, and this is an absolute perfect combo because this lens is kind of heavy where this camera is much lighter, and putting those together balances out, especially if I put a battery on the back of it plus a monitor, and then I have a one of those what are those called, matte boxes. It really makes the camera, I wish I had it built out right now, but I wanted to bring it down and break it down to its course. Actually, let me know down in the comments below if you want me to make a dedicated video of my social media content rig. Happily do that because I think it's pretty good. You know, funny thing when I say that is that I've come to learn that every single camera rig is never fully complete. There's always one single missing piece or one more thing that's going to make it just right. And I'm pretty close with the rig that I've come up with this, and yeah, I'll definitely make a video about that. But yeah, those are the R cameras that I have. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the R8, then you're going to want to check out this video right here. Adios.